Welcome to the first episode of this year's Overdose Peak Season Power Series. We built this 6-part series for digital and e-commerce professionals who want to sharpen their peak season performance. Each episode is packed with practical insights you can put to work straight away. You can find the full lineup on our site. It will be at Overdose Digital Peak Season Power Series. And our door is always open to your curiosity, your thoughts, or any questions that might pop up throughout and after the session. I'm Bige, or B if it's easier for you, Digital Marketing Director of Overdose, covering Australian offices, and joining me, Carla, co-founder and CEO of Profit Peak. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll be diving into Profit in Peak, followed by a quick Q&A and key takeaways. If you have any questions, please feel free to shout them in the comment section, and we are going to be covering them throughout the session. Let's get into it. Great. Before we kick off, I would like to hear a bit about you, Carla, and what Profit Peak does and your experience in the field.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me, Bige. I'm really excited to be sharing this time with you. We always have a good chat and sometimes go a little long on the chat side. So try and keep things concise today. But essentially, I am here to talk about my personal experience having been an e-commerce founder myself. I'm also a mum and a second-time co-founder with my husband, and I like to say we haven't killed each other yet. But essentially, over the last decade, I have exited 4 e-commerce brands, and managed huge inventory bases with 25,000 SKUs in our own warehouse. And I'm very, very passionate about what it takes to build a profitable business, because I think platforms like Shopify were really made to enable entrepreneurs to get revenue and ideally actually make money, not just generate revenue. And so profitability is a really important part of the equation. And what's Profit Peak? I get asked this all the time. We are the only profit optimization platform in the market. We're about consolidating all your data into a single environment and allowing you in real time to automate decision-making and get recommendations across how marketing and inventory relate back to things like operations and forecasting. So ultimately, you don't just grow a revenue-rich business, but you also grow a profit-rich business.
Awesome. Thank you for that quick intro. And one of the biggest questions and a big topic for our clients and from the events that we attend is, what should we expect from this year's Black Friday period? So what helps to benchmark that against year on year and month on month is we always look at what happened last year and try to understand by looking at the percentage increases. And I know you guys have a really valuable data pool. Would you like to share what you guys have seen, what you predict from this year's Black Friday season?
Yeah, for sure, Bige. I think one of the things I preface all of last year's data with is, in my experience over the last decade, is every year just gets more expensive. So even if we look at last year's numbers, we need to take into account the fact that this year is going to be even more competitive and more expensive. It's like everything in life, there's inflation. So last year's numbers aren't going to be your best case scenario this year. It's actually going to be higher. So when I do share these numbers, I think there's a few key takeaways though that we should focus on today in terms of how we plan. I don't know if you agree, but planning is everything when it comes to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and not being reactive, rather strategic.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think about, some clients focus on CAC versus AOV. I know we had a side chat on that the other day. I'm sure you're going to touch on it, but that was a really key takeaway for me.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one. I think businesses where you have a flat margin profile, so the cost of all the different products you sell in your assortment are at the same level of margin across the board, CAC to AOV makes sense. But if you're in a business where you're operating with different levels of margin, so one product could be a 60% margin, another product could be a 40% margin, CAC to AOV doesn't really work anymore because you're not operating at the same level of profitability. So that's when you really need to switch to other metrics like gross profit or contribution profit, which we will touch on in a little bit as to how that actually gets calculated. But there are a few headlines that I thought was really interesting from our data. A lot of businesses, and I remember feeling this in the past, think, oh, my competitor's gone out at this huge discount. I need a discount more than them to get traction. Yet the data we saw, 10 to 25% offers actually outperformed the 50, 60, 70, 80% offers.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, I really think so as well. And I think the other thing that's quite interesting about it is you're still protecting brand at that level of discount. And it almost says a lot to the power of brand, because if your brand needs a 50, 60, 70% off discount to sell, is that really something you want to gift in Black Friday? Yeah, so I think if that's something anyone can take away is you don't have to be the deepest discounter to win. And when you're talking about that CAC to AOV, which we just spoke about, your AOV is going to decline because you're giving a site-wide sale. So you need to take that into account as to how that impacts how you offset the CAC and then realign CAC with what your new AOV is. And we saw that drop by 5% on average. And a really interesting other data point, and it's an interesting one because Australia Post is often who we look to in e-commerce for benchmarking data. Australia Post reported that Monday was the best day on the actual Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. But I challenge that. I think it was the best day for Australia Post because the most parcels left consumers, went and headed out to consumers. But what we actually saw was the Friday trade was the biggest day for our customers. And this is across $1.5 billion worth of trading data. And that's predominantly Australian businesses and Australian businesses trading into the US. Of course, this is one that everyone feels the pinch. You guys probably talk about it internally all the time when you're setting customers' expectations, but CAC only goes up and it goes up across every single platform. But I think the key takeaway here, which is really interesting, is some of the fashion players we're working with, and you guys are probably seeing it too, TikTok is the biggest traffic driver to their website. And TikTok was actually the cheapest of the three platforms in terms of how much CAC went up during the November trade period. So that could be a really interesting insight for any fashion customers listening along, thinking about how they're allocating budget across the different platforms. If you're getting maximum traffic from a platform and the cost of CAC hasn't gone up as much as other platforms, maybe that's something you want to double down on this year.
Yeah, and that was usually fashion and apparel, is that right?
Jewelry, fashion, footwear, they were really the ones that benefited from that TikTok CPM and CPAs not being quite as high as the other platforms, but still the main traffic driver.
That's super valuable to know. We've also done a similar study in the next slide, where we had a look at Overdose Black Friday data and compared year on year. I know your data was month on month, so this is like a bit of a different angle, but our data is super aligned with what you've gone through just now. All of the spend in channels increased at a minimum of 20%. Bing only had 8% increase, but that's really minimal compared to other channels in terms of investment every year. CPC and CPM, they've skyrocketed, and every year they go up and up. For example, this year, before the session, I had a quick look in Google Ads from 1st of Jan to 15th of September. Our CPC has already increased by 9% on average across our Australian clients. So we are expecting cost of acquiring new customers and sales. It's going to be definitely more than 9% year on year during Black Friday, which is, I guess we all expected that to happen.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And it's not surprising. It's the same with everything. Every year, every cost is going up. And as a result, these businesses have shareholders that they also have to return to. So the cost of using their platforms and getting those eyeballs continues to go up.
100%.
This is a key takeaway for sure. I've actually got two key takeaways from this actually as a point. But the first one is what we saw is that of that returning customer cohort, it was generally around 25% of our customers' revenue in November, but those customers actually came from August and October new customer acquisitions. So while cost is up around 9% already from your numbers, if you can be acquiring it in August, which is obviously past now, but October, which is next month, that 9% may still hold, but it might be 19% in November or even more to acquire that new customer. So it's never too early to start building those funnels. I've also seen a lot of data around the time people plan their Black Friday, Cyber Monday purchasing. I don't know about you, but I start to think a couple of months out, like what am I starting to buy? So I bought a swimming costume on Sunday and I thought I probably shouldn't have done that because I could have dealt with the swimming costumes I already own in my closet. And then just bought this in November because I know the brand's going to do a sideways sale, which is their once a year sideways sale on Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Yeah.
So I was already planning that shopping list in September. So we're all consumers. Have you started planning at all?
Yeah, I have a little note going on my phone. I'm guilty as well.
Yeah, but what does that say for all our customers, right? That means our customers are already planning now. So if we're not getting in front of our customers now and expecting to acquire all our customers in November, we've got a problem. So the strategy is already broken before the season's even begun.
Yeah, I have a question. It's interesting to me that August and October are key months for new customer acquisition, but September is not that. What do you guys have seen happening in September?
Yeah, I think a lot of brands are already on sale in September. And I think when they've gone on sale, they've potentially got their ads less focused on new customer acquisition, and those ads that are sales driven are more bottom of funnel, and they're focused on generating conversion value. And, you know, that instant sugar high of, oh my gosh, we've hit our revenue numbers for the month. And September is traditionally a tough month, and October. So I think that's probably why September lags in terms of the new customer acquisition cohort coming back in November.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I also think a really cool call out here is you've got 70 days to get them back post BFCM. So on average, if you acquired new customers and were able to get them to return in November, you had 70 days before they came back. So really, for a lot of people who work in CRM and across the life cycle marketing, you can actually start being really strategic now and thinking about what are you doing for that 70 days post Black Friday, Cyber Monday to start bringing customers back, and what does that look like for your brand?
Yeah, that's super valuable. So during that 70 days, going after remarketing is quite pivotal to increase that remaining revenue share.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we were at another event a couple of weeks ago we did with Klaviyo, and one of the insights that Sam from Muscle Nation shared was that they were able to get their Black Friday, Cyber Monday customer, that November cohort, to repeat shop. And I think that is something really unique to their brand. But every brand I've been talking to, I've been saying, how can you get your November really expensive cohort customer to repeat shop in November? Like, to me, that's money goals, right? That should be everyone's goal this Black Friday, Cyber Monday, is to get that customer back more than once in November, because suddenly that CAC is halved now because it's split across 2 orders.
And Profit Peak can visualize that data, exactly. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And Profit Peak will be able to show you what's new versus return across your acquisition, and how profitable it all is in real time, but also what products at that exact point in time are resonating with new versus return customers. So you know immediately as it's happening, we got this customer back and they've actually purchased this product, was the next in their product journey. So you can use that as a reason to bring customers back within the period.
That's super powerful. Amazing. Yeah. Great. I know you and I, we have a lot of chats about this, and I'm quite familiar with how Profit Peak works. We have a few clients within the platform and we find it really valuable. What are some of your framework guidelines and suggestions for the retailers to have a profitable growth during the peak this year?
Yeah. Great question. And I think I come at this less as from the Profit Peak mindset, but my mindset, having been a founder myself and managing our own digital team as well, as to like how we were planning and how we got really strategic before the event. And it all comes back to what is ROI for your business. So if you don't have a set goal in terms of ROI and you're just focusing on revenue, you can get a rude shock. So I try to remind all brands, it's never too early to actually start setting profit goals and saying, okay, we don't have visibility to the full P&L of the business in terms of what is like total profit, but we do have a line of sight as to what's contribution profit. So just to take a step back for anyone who is thinking, okay, I like the sound of this, but I don't actually know how to calculate that. Contribution profit is your net revenue. So that's your revenue after things like returns and refunds. And then what you take and your GST. Don't include GST in your revenue and ROI calcs, because that's money that doesn't actually belong to the business that you're working with. And then you take away the cost of the product. So what you've actually sold and what that costs to land in the country. And then you take away all the digital advertising spend, any of your offline marketing spend, and then any other variable costs in the business. And so typically they're percentage numbers. So you know roughly on average it costs X percent to ship a parcel to a customer. You know that your merchant fees are 2%, or if it's an afterpay, it might be 4%, whatever those numbers are. And then you get to this really cool ROI number, which is contribution profit. And the only way to actually get that number higher, which is why this is a really cool number to bind your team around, is by getting better AOV on the top line, getting higher margins, as in buying product for less or discounting less, or lowering your CAC. They're your only levers to actually getting a better result from contribution profit. So it's a really good number to anchor around. And then there's a lot of levers you can pull, but they actually touch on different team members, especially if you're working in the digital, because you may actually have to start having conversations, which we really encourage with product teams, because it's really the product team that owns the margin and owns the COGS. You own the CAC. So when you start working together, you can really find the right balance.
Yeah, and I guess that would impact merchandising as well.
It does, absolutely. Like, how do we drive higher AOV? You start thinking about, what can I do on my PDPs differently to get more items in the basket? How can we do bundling? How can we be really smart about the way we place products in the funnel, whether it's even at checkout? You guys do a lot around conversion rate optimization. Sometimes just getting that extra item in the checkout can be the difference between profitability and not after CAC.
Definitely.
And I always love this slide because it reminds everyone that discounting isn't free. Everyone thinks, we're going to give away this discount and we're going to hit this revenue number because we've given away this discount. But it actually often doesn't happen, because that discount actually means you're generating less revenue from your customers. So this is a really good way of showing it visually. The difference between making a profit and not can be a 10% difference in your discount. So if we think about the middle example there, your COGS is the same, so the product cost is the same, your variable expense is the same, your CAC is the same. The only difference is your level of discounting. And you can see at 20% off, you've made a $5 profit. But if you went 30% off, you've actually lost $10. And the really scary thing about that is that negative $10 compounds. Because if you're losing $10 off every order in your peak season, and in your peak season, you've done 10,000 orders instead of 3,000 orders, you've actually lost a lot of money. So it's pretty scary.
It is.
Yeah, that's why I encourage everyone to know what your contribution profit is, because this shows you how the discount impacts that.
Yeah, planning is key, like knowing your data and understanding your lowest benchmark ROI.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's actually a fashion retailer based in Melbourne, an amazing Australian brand. And the founder recently at Retail Fest mentioned, and she actually called me out, which was really nice. She probably knows who she is if she's listening, that their first Black Friday, Cyber Monday ever, they were all cheering and screaming because they were selling so much stock and they had their biggest trade day ever. And then she got her financial statement from her accountant and she realized that they lost $300,000 in November, which was supposed to be their Super Bowl moment as a brand. So it can happen to anyone. Pretty scary, right?
Yes, that hurts even me.
Yeah, hurts anyone, right? And the crazy thing is if you lost that $300,000 in November, and then in January after Chinese New Year, you have to go back to the factories and start putting up cash to buy new orders for your next range. And if you've lost money and then you need to do that, what cash do you have to actually then go back and buy new product?
That's so smart.
Yeah. So that's the scary thing. So I had another conversation with a brand yesterday. That's a customer, Serafina, shout out to you guys. And they were saying, you feel really rich in January when you look at the bank account because you've got all this cash that you've generated from November and December. And then by end of January, once you start paying all your invoices to the factories for your next drop, it's like a sudden jolt back to reality. Like, it's all going back into inventory. But that's the founder life. And I totally get that. I've been there. So going back to the whole CAC versus discount, I think it's really important that brands realize, one, that it's not free, but two, there's a balance to be striked. And if you can strike the right balance, you will be profitable. But ultimately, you can't just glaze over it. You need to know your numbers and you can't just hope. I always say profitability isn't accidental, it's operational. So you really need to know what CAC you can operate at to be profitable. And I'm guessing you guys have similar conversations with your brands when it comes to like, how are you discounting and how are we now going to benchmark CAC through the cycle?
We do a quite similar methodology. We call it unit economics analysis.
Yes.
But yeah, it captures most of the things you've mentioned, like their return rate, what's their lifetime value of per customer on average, and cost of goods sold, tax, all of the impact. And then we get a lowest benchmark for ROI and their profitable ROI.
Yes.
So that's how we map the strategy for the peak season.
Amazing. And then that just shows how important it is to start thinking about that 70-day window to get the customer back, because you've built that into your assumption when you're talking about balancing your discount and CAC. So you can't forget that. Like the Super Bowl's not over on that Monday. It's now about how you turn that first-time customer into a repeat shop, or even if they're a second-time customer. I'm sure your data might be similar that you've seen, but we find the biggest drop-off is between order 2 and 3. So a lot of brands are great and engaging between order 1 and 2, but order 2 and 3 is much more challenging. I think we've touched on this, but know your CAC ceiling. It's exactly what you guys do. You do your break-even analysis, and then you do your profit analysis. And then a brand can decide, hey, we're going gung-ho on new customer acquisition. We just want to break even. Don't encourage it, but I get it. Some people do feel that that's the best option. And a great place to start is doing simple analysis. I love what we do in Profit Peak to give ourselves a shout out, because Sherpa actually knows all your data and calculates this on the fly. So you don't have to grab spreadsheets. You don't have to look up things like lifetime value. It just shoots out exactly what your break-even scenarios are. And then what are the different scenarios with the different discounts for profit.
Yeah, and I think you also have support available if brands need it, to have a chat with your team as well, which is great.
Yeah, that's very true. One of the things I love doing, and so does my co-founder, is chatting with brands every month, giving 30 minutes of open office hours, and you book into our diaries and we can then chat through the data and talk about strategies, but also show you what new we've pushed in product. We're very proud we push product weekly. We listen to our customers. They're part of our roadmap and our journey as to what we're building. And so I love when I can say, hey, this feature you told me that you would absolutely live and die by, I've pushed this live in your account this week. It's actually one I've done for one of our shared customers this week.
Oh, great.
And I think this slide really goes back to what I mentioned with Sam at Muscle Nation. They change up their offer. And by changing up the offer, they managed to get that customer back twice in November. And I think that's epic. Like, if you can do that, that's money goals. Like, I admire so much that they could do that, because I was never able to do that in 10 years on my journey. But if I was still running my e-com business, I would be sitting and strategizing up all night, every night, trying to just work out how I crack that code. And I've given a few ideas here with like ways that I think you could do it, around like bundling, changing up offers with gift with purchases, doing an influencer collaboration with like a limited product drop could be a good one. I know we're getting late for you to plan that. One my customer Live Body does that goes off the chain is mystery boxes. LSKD does a great job with them. Proud Poppy does the great job with them as well. I think the key though, and this is an insight Drew from Tile Cloud shared with me on a stage recently, was it's the right balance of new to old stock. So especially if you acquire new customers with a mystery box and then you just give them all your dead slow moving product, do you think that customer is going to come back?
I wouldn't.
No, the customer's going to hate your brand and probably never shop with you again. So it's really, really important that you think about how you build that mystery box and make it an amazing experience so people engage with your brand in that same way again, or buy your full price product in the future.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to call out here is what we've seen happening. If you have a really complicated offer, it's so difficult to get it approved in ad platforms as well.
Yes.
So I 100% agree. Like, these are a really good guideline of what we would also suggest as Overdose to consider as Black Friday offers.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure you've had those Friday night calls from founders being like, Bige, we're not happy, the numbers aren't good, let's change up the offer. And you're like, no, but it's going to go back into approvals and then we may not have any ads live, and that's not a good idea. No brand wants to be like that.
Yeah, story of my life.
Yeah, there you go. The mobile phone rings at 5 p.m. on a Friday and you're like, oh, okay, what's wrong?
Yeah.
But especially on Black Friday, you don't want to have to call your agency on 5 p.m. on a Friday to say, hey, let's change up the offer. If you've planned and you've been really strategic, you don't have to make those calls. And I know as a founder, I would hate to make that call, but you're in panic mode. And so I think we all need to get out of panic mode, and strategy is how we do that. I also talk about this a lot, if anyone has listened to me speak before, but a lot of things around CAC, like if you work with a great agency like Overdose, you're already doing best practice. So you've already got the best CAC possible and the best advertising outcome that you can get in terms of what you can do within Meta, Google, TikTok, Pinterest, whatever platforms you use. Your only other lever outside of that is optimizing your product mix and how you put products where in the funnel and what products you make intentional purchases for your customer. And so I always talk about prioritizing the right products, especially if you're a multi-margin business. Prioritize the products where you make the most margin, that have the greatest sales velocity and have the highest conversion rates. And especially on Black Friday, when inventory starts to thin out towards the end of the month, don't advertise those products with broken size curves where you know you're going to have high bounce rates. Customers are in panic shopping mode. They know they only have like 2 days left of sale to shop. And if you don't have their size, they're not going to browse through the rest of your website looking for their size. They're going to bounce to your next competitor and find that they have their size in stock. So I think that's something we all forget about as inventory starts to thin out closer to the end of that weekend.
Yeah, and also all ad platforms, search results in Google and also under Meta updates, they are getting smarter and they provide you unique results for your size, color preference, search history, your behavior in general on social media. So that's why it's super important to get the right data and understanding your customer behavior.
Yeah, exactly. And I see it especially with fashion brands. There's like these 10 products that every new customer buys. You should have those 10 products front and center if you're trying to acquire new customers. And they're typically like those core entry products. And often when I look at customers' funnel building and what products they've positioned where, I'm like, why are your acquisition products sitting in the bottom of funnel campaigns when you know that's hitting your returning customers? Get those products up to the top of the funnel and try and shorten that customer journey. Because if you show the right product to the right customer, you may be having 1 or 2 less clicks in the journey or impressions when it comes to Meta and TikTok, and then you're spending less to acquire that customer. And that comes into like how you manage your ads and inventory. And this is more of a long-term play, but always know what are your best performers, what are your contenders, and what's holding you back, your cash killers. And then build your ads and ad feeds around these 3 segments. And that allows you then to double down and invest the most budget where you get the best results, not just average out results and look for an average ROAS.
And I love how we can use Profit Peak to automate this process. And then this gives a huge operational efficiency to our team, and we get a way more deeper intelligence on how our clients' performance is going and which items that we should push through high margin product category campaign, or as you've said, looking at your new user acquisition items. So in Peak, definitely we'll be using this structure.
Amazing. Yeah, it worked for us and we see it work for a lot of the brands that we are working with. And I find when you remove the ad ops from the background and you make everything more efficient, the results are just so much better because you can get strategic. You suddenly have all this time to really think about creative and where creative sits in the funnel. This is key. Get yourself real-time data. I think the number one thing, sometimes people feel like the more data they get, the more difficult it is to make decisions or the more confused they are. But what we tend to see with our customers is that once they get real-time data, they get out of panic mode because there's kind of like this safety feeling. I know what's going on. I know how we're trading. I know how we're pacing. And you get this like level of comfort around where you're at as a business and what you can achieve. And then you also understand what levers you can pull and what's available to you and your agency to get better results. So I really encourage people not shying away from the numbers. That's when mistakes happen. And I saw a social post from Brittany from Fate the Label the other day where she was like, get yourself a good accountant and know your numbers. And I agree with that fully. And I think that should also be real time because when Meta gets out of control on your credit card, and suddenly you've lost $300,000 in your biggest trading period of the year, it's very hard to reinvest in inventory the next year without getting debt. Actually, spoke to someone the other day who sold their house to reinvest in inventory after having a 15-year profitable, highly profitable e-commerce business for 15 years. Last year, Meta just ran wild on her credit card. They lost control, never had a good, practices and procedures in place. And now she sold her house to reinvest back into the business because she was running out of inventory and cash to rebuy. And this was a business making millions a year in profit previously. So it does happen.
Yeah.
And if you shy away from your numbers and you get all digging yourself into a hole, it only gets worse. And it's a really hard place to dig yourself out of. And I'm proud of her. She's amazing. She's going to get herself out of it and get her business back on track.
Yeah, she's definitely a fighter.
She is. Entrepreneurs are. We don't give up easy. Even if sometimes we should give up, we don't. I'm sure you have a lot of conversations as well with your customers around not panicking and resetting expectations, things like that.
Yeah, so my team they are quite experienced in looking at what happened in the previous years. Most of them have 5 years of Black Friday experience working at Overdose, and we have a huge checklist of nightmare cases that might happen. And then we share it with our clients and say, look, these are the things that we should be aware of and plan ahead, because it might happen. Even though it's a less likely case, we want to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely keep your example in mind, because that's one of the most
nightmares.
frightening ones that I've heard.
Yep, the nightmares, the absolute nightmares. And I'm just going to double down on this because I know I spoke about it before, but I know you guys agree. Plan for the retention piece up front. Plan for how you turn that one-time customer into a repeat shopper. And there's so many great strategies to do that. I'm obviously a big Klaviyo fan. I was actually a Klaviyo customer since 2012, so probably one of the first in Australia. But really start thinking about your flows, how you're re-engaging customers. What does that post-purchase journey look like? And I always like to give the example of a plain text email from the founder, thinking about if you've got a founder-led brand, we work with a lot of great founder-led brands like Arms of Eve and Who is Elijah. And imagine getting an email from the founder of a brand that you admire and shop with, thanking you for your November or December order in plain text, feeling like a one-to-one email. That is a great way to get one, cut through in the inbox. 2, supercharge your deliverability, but 3, get them to purchase again before the new year. So shorten that 70-day window.
One thing, your example reminded me, one of the best remarketing examples I've seen is, it happened to one of our teammates actually. They purchased a artwork and then they started getting remarketed of how they pack that item and ship it and the process of it while they were waiting for their product to get shipped, which is so personalized and unique, and also emphasizes the creative. And I loved it. That's a great example.
Yeah, but that could be a way to get that customer back that second time and shorten that window. Great example. Another route to plan for retention upfront outside of Klaviyo, which is a great opportunity to have as well. I have a few key takeaways. You might have some to add, but ROI, profitability, that is not revenue. That's measured at contribution margin line, and that's what it's all about. And discounting is not free. It is not your lever to business success. You need to balance CAC and discount. They're 2 sides of the same coin. So you're either flipping the coin to spend more on CAC, or you're flipping the coin to discount more. It actually has to be considered on both sides. And then we've obviously shared our 5-step framework for how you turn your growth into profitable growth and thinking about what levers you can pull. And then we never really touched on it, but I think all brands are aware of what's coming, which is the BFCM hangover. It's that moment where suddenly revenue drops. We see 60% typically as a result, because obviously a lot of pent-up spend has happened in November, and then December, everyone has a lot less money to spend and they're starting to think about their food bill and other things for Christmas, or the holidays that they celebrate. And so that's why I talk about retention. And I know great agencies like Overdose, you're going to dial back ad budgets for your customers anyway. But if you're not working with an agency, start dialing your ad budget back after Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because that urgency of the customer to buy is no longer there, but the CAC and the CPM is still sky high. And so try and think about how you use retention to buffer that drop in revenue. and see you through the period with some solid numbers.
I don't have anything else to add to that.
Oh, wow. Okay,
That's great.
cool. I'm glad I nailed it. Thank you, Bige.
100% nailed it.
Amazing. Well, awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was super valuable, and it's always a pleasure to have a chat with you. Now it's time for the Q&A. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment them. So we'll give a 10-second little break and wait for you. I guess we don't have any questions, but you know where to find us. Thank you so much. In the next slide, we are going to show what's upcoming. Next week, guess what? You're going to see me again. And this time, you're going to have Google joining me, our beautiful, beautiful supporter and great agency partner, Ash, will be with us. And we are going to cover what's upcoming and how to set up your account for success and some tips and tricks for tactical setup and optimizations for the peak. Thank you so much for your time today and hope to see you next session. Whoop, we have a question. What channels do you suggest increasing investment in across September, October to supercharge your new customer acquisition? Following on from this, when do you recommend doubling down on remarketing activity to ensure we stay engaged with these users? Great question, Nathan. Would you like to take this?
I think you're the expert here. Come on.
Obviously. Okay, so what we usually suggest during September is double down on your new user acquisition channels, like social channels, including TikTok, like you've mentioned, which is also cheaper to acquire that new customer database. We also found success in Reddit this year. It's a new channel that's becoming more popular in the ad space. I'm an avid Reddit user in my personal time, but also for ads, we've started to see a lot of success there. Snapchat, if you have a younger demographic, that's also a really good channel to double down on in September. Also Meta, obviously, which is always a great channel to acquire that all age demographic users. Google, we usually start investing on non-brand and performance max demand gen video YouTube section, and then double down on that bottom of the funnel part where we focus on shopping and add a bit of brand as well. And for retention, I think we've covered everything there in your slides, but if you'd like to add the retention part, Carla.
Yeah, I think it's about thinking what product your customer's next going to buy. So segmenting out your cohorts depending on what they purchased and then what is from the data the next likely purchase, and getting your flow set up and structured around what is the most likely next purchase is a great way to bring customers back. I also think on the Reddit front, I just wanted to add something. I think a lot of like ChatGPT's data sourcing is going to come from places like Reddit. So brands also need to start thinking with AI, SEO coming out and going to become a prominent source of traffic for your business into the future, what Reddit is actually saying about your brand. Because the ChatGPT and all the other AI models out of there, they skew to negative data. So if there are any negative forums or any negative comments about your brand or your business from past experiences, even if it was 10 years ago, they're coming straight into ChatGPT. So if a customer is shopping this Black Friday, Cyber Monday for the first time with your brand, having been exposed to it through socials, they're going to type into GPT and say, what can you tell me about brand X, Y, and Z? And if there are negative comments about your brand, that is going to come straight into ChatGPT. So unlike Google search, where you have control over what messaging you show for your brand, you don't have control in GPT. So start thinking about if you do have negative comments anywhere on the web, for example, or in any forums, cleaning them up and actually responding to them, even if they're really old, to show that you've taken the feedback on board and changed its business.
Amazing. Great. I guess we don't have any other questions. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next week.